guitar teachers and students, welcome back. So today we're continuing on with part 3 of our series on classical improvisation and taking a look at passing tones. Let's get into it. So what is a passing tone? A passing tone is when we take notes from the scale and we put them in between notes on the chord. So let's say we're in the key of A minor and our scale is just A, B, C, D, E, F, G, just like this. And in the A minor chord, our notes are A, C, and E. We could put passing tones in between all of those just like this, which allows us to fairly easily take something like this, which we would have done in part 1, and turn it into something like this. So that sounds great, right? I mean, it's a definite step towards our goal of improvising classical music. So you're probably thinking to yourself, Drew, well, okay, so you probably don't know me as Drew. You're probably thinking to yourself, Mr. Wichita Guitar Academy, man, why didn't you just mention this in like the last video? This is super easy. I don't understand why it needs to be its own video, which, believe it or not, there's some kind of deceptive difficulty to all of that. Let's take a look at that. So in this style, passing tones for the most part exist as one scale tone in between two chord tones. So if we think about our A minor chord, A, C, and E, if we walk from this A up to this C, with that B in between, well, we're good because we start on an A and then we have the B, which is from the scale, and then we have C, which is from the chord. And then we can keep going, C, D, E, and we're still meeting all of our criteria, right? Because we started on a note in the chord, the C, and then we had a note from the scale, and then we had another note from the chord, which is the E. But then what? We know we have this high A up here, right? So can we just keep walking up and do it like this? And the answer is no. If you're going for this classical style sound, you really can't do this because it goes through two non-chord tones to get to the next chord tone. We have to go through the F and the G to get to the A. Which isn't to say that in all of music this is a bad thing to do, right? But it's a much more modern sound. Like all of our old, dead European friends would not have liked it very much. Somebody like James Taylor would really like it, but Giuliani would not. So what if we're going the other direction, right? So we start on this high E, and then we walk it down to the A. Can we keep going to get to this low E right here? Again, no, we can't, because we have to go through the G and the F to get there, and neither of those are in the chord. So let's say we just did this. What do we do when we get there? Well, I mean, one option is just to turn around and go back in the other direction, right? But if we want to continue in that direction, the easiest thing to do is go back to our, chord tone only stuff from part 1 and do something like. So in general, as long as you're doing this chord tone only stuff, you can kind of skip around wherever you want. And the only rule that you really have to think about is when you switch back to scale, you should go in the opposite direction of how you were skipping, right? So if we had something like this, and we wanted to switch back to scale, where we could just do that, because we were just skipping up, and then we scale down. Quick side note, you'll notice I used a G sharp there, which isn't technically in the key, but in minor keys, when you're messing around with the one chord, that sharp note below the root note is usually the way to go. You usually want to sharp that. Which brings us to the other difficult thing about this, which is the 5 chord in minor keys. So those of you that have followed along with the worksheets probably noticed that the 5 chord in minor keys is dominant, which doesn't actually fit into the confines of the major scale, right? So in A minor, our 5 chord is this E7. And E7 has this G sharp in it, which isn't in the key of A minor. Now, when we're doing this chord tone only stuff, it's really easy enough to manage, that G sharp. With the neighbor tones from part 2, I may have set you up for failure on that part just a little bit, which to me is okay to do sometimes. I feel like sometimes failure is the best demonstration of value, right? But this passing tone stuff, we absolutely have to get this worked out. So again, we're in the key of A minor. And we're going to do some stuff with our 5 chord, which is E7. And we want to walk up from this high E to this high G sharp. So if we use the F natural that's actually in the key, it sounds like this. kind of Middle Eastern sounding, right? And it sounds like that going in the other direction too. It's not really what we're going for. So assuming we don't want to just skip the headache and jump around to some chord tones, we want to use the F sharp like this. Or the other direction like this. And in context that would sound something like this. So if you've been around music theory and classical music for a while, you might be thinking about things like harmonic minor and melodic minor, ascending and descending forms of the minor scale, which if it helps you to think about all of this in that way, by all means. Personally, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. I feel like any composer in this style worth their salt would tell you that it has everything to do with context and very little to do with anything else. So just trust your ears when you're doing this and you'll be okay. So the worksheets this week, linked down in the description. The big thing that I've added are some practice themes of sorts where there are already chord tones on downbeats, and it's your job to go through and figure out where you can add in passing tones and where you can't. If we're shooting for this purely classical style, that ability to tell one from the other is really supremely important. It'll keep you sounding more like a Guado and less like James Taylor. There are also some more of the space to play around worksheets, which I'd encourage you to go through and really make use of everything that we've talked about so far, right? So do some chord tone only stuff, do some neighbor tone stuff, do some passing tone stuff, all in the same line. Once you get to the point where you're pretty comfortable with all that stuff and both the treble and the bass voices, you're gonna start to sound pretty good. It's a definite milestone that between you and me, like 99% of classical musicians never get to. Hopefully this was helpful for you. Leave a comment down below and let me know what you think and how you're getting on with all this. Remember to like and subscribe and share with your friends, and I will see you back next week for part 4, which is going to be the last part in the series for a little while. All right, take care.